Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us at Impossible Live. Welcome if this is your first time, if you're returning, or if you're catching us on a replay. And I'd love to just thank you for joining us. And it's been that kind of day. So before we introduce you to amazing Teresa and start with a great dialogue, a couple of things. One is this virtual toast is for you with smiles across the miles. And I'd love when you have a chance, if you're joining us live or you're joining us on replay, let us know where you're joining us from and let us know a way that we can help you in between our impossible lives. Let us know if there's somebody you're looking to meet, if maybe you have a new offer, a new service that you're launching, a new something that you just want some more eyes on and some more attention. And we will definitely do our best to help you get it or to meet somebody in our listening audience who may be a great fit for you. One of the things that I'm laughing about today, and I thank Teresa for her amazing flexibility. And the two of us reconnected on Saturday after not connecting for a while. We had connected live on Clubhouse, I think in Lachelle's Elephant Strategy Club. And shout out to Lachelle, America's Supermom. And I love Teresa's voice. And we booked the date and we didn't really delve into a topic. And I know a lot of times we talk about where did our titles come from. And I appreciate Teresa and her amazing energy because we floated around about 7 or 8 different topics. And this was kind of where we started. We were talking about being at a point where we're in a world where managing our emotions in business and in life getting a little more challenging. Teresa mentioned emotional intelligence. I mentioned positive intelligence and mental fitness. But I'd love today to give Teresa a chance to introduce herself and let us know a little bit more about wonderful Teresa.
Well, thank you so much. What a nice introduction. And I'm thrilled to be here, actually. So, just a little bit about me. My background is in sales. I was in sales as an account executive and a sales manager for over 30 years, and mostly working in the corporate world. And I don't know if you've ever worked in the corporate world or if you've ever been in corporate sales, but it's pretty high pressure. It's pretty toxic. And so in 2021, I decided I can't do that anymore. It was taking a toll on my health. I didn't feel good. So I thought, well, I'm going to jump out of like the real world and jump online and create a business around coaching and sales and that sort of thing. And if you've ever done that, that's a real experience in and of itself. After several iterations of what it was I wanted to do, I finally settled on I'm a sales coach, sales trainer, sales mentor. But my goal, my big why, is to change the sales arena so that it's not so transactional, not so pushy, not so icky, and teach people how to have like real conversations, real business conversations. And as Melanie mentioned, that entails some emotional intelligence, right? It's about being aware of who you are in the space. And if you're just there dumping your information and somebody's just taking notes, that's not a sales conversation. That's a sales presentation, right? You want to draw them in, but also being very aware of how they're reacting, right? Because when we say something in a business meeting, we're giving information, we're helping them to make a decision. And if it doesn't land right, or if it lands really well, you need to know that and you need to be able to read that and just create this energy between the two people, or however many people are in the room or on the Zoom, so that it's not actually a sales meeting, but a buying meeting. It's an opportunity to buy something that's really going to help them. So that's my whole goal, is to help current salespeople and entrepreneurs who are at a pretty high level of selling themselves learn how to do this so that they are working with people that actually are going to become clients and closing way more sales because they're able to help at a higher level. And these clients become lifelong clients, right? Because that's how you help them. And so that's my goal, is really to change the face of sales, like one salesperson and one entrepreneur at a time, so that we can create these great conversations and actually, get the ick out of sales, quite frankly. So that's what I'm doing now.
Oh, absolutely love that, and love to welcome back Natalie. Welcome back, Chris. And oh, Tamiko, I adore you. Welcome, love, and thanks for joining us for the first time. I I think it's interesting when we're talking about the process of having conversations, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it when we were talking this weekend. Somebody had reached out to me last week. It was an introduction, and they've got products and services that they're trying to share with others. And person asked me to share my story, and I'm finding now it's an interesting thing as we're approaching creating conversations and how to manage our emotions in business. But I realized, as we were saying, we really have to kind of feel the right kind of energy. If I don't feel the screen energy or the in person energy, not sharing my story. I remember a financial services person years ago um, asking me things about my style, and I we were in a diner, and I remember it because even though we were in a diner and we were in a booth, I just really wasn't comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the conversation, he's like, "Who are you?" And I remember smiling to myself because I had never had such a challenging face to face conversation. And he had set it up like he was interested in my products and services. I said, "I'm somebody who you're not going to get to know that quickly." And it really took a lot for me to say it out loud. I didn't feel care and concern. I didn't feel attention. I didn't feel the right screen energy or the right in person energy. And this conversation last week kind of reminded me of this financial services person. And no offense, I know, this is a professional who's out in the world to help others find solutions. I just really felt there was a real heavy sales pitch. I don't know if maybe I was in a mood that day of, in between projects, or kind of like I wish they would get to it. And it kind of
Mm.
was interesting because I think they were going out of their way to try and be curious.
Mm.
And what I was missing in the conversation was the be bold part.
Mm.
The be bold part means we're both present. We kind of feel there's another amazing human on the other end. You
Right.
know, it's the right place. And thanks, Roz, for popping in. Oh, Roz, you are missed. And thanks for a great topic. And definitely, Roz, also check out Teresa when you can. She's got a real gem. We talked about how to approach sales, and I appreciate that because this person, just like the financial services person, they were trying to sell something.
Right.
They hadn't really determined what the needs were. They didn't know whether it was a good fit. They really didn't know anything about me. And I realized if it's not a be bold environment, I'm not as discoverable as I could be.
Right.
And we're not as comfortable. I have friends who kept saying, "Hey, Mel, it's about safe spaces and creating safe spaces." But if the person on the other end doesn't help light us up, we don't explore.
Right.
We don't share any gems. There's no fireworks going off. There's no transformations. And I'd love if you could share some of the gems we were talking about how you suggest we show up.
Right.
Not just when we're trying to sell, but when we're trying to be bold. That
Right.
would be fantastic.
Right. Well, the first mistake is showing up trying to sell. Trying to sell is just a really bad frame of mind because it's pass, fail, win, lose, right? There is no in between. So you either get a yes or a no and you move on. So trying to sell is not a great space. But the big mistake this financial person made with you is not understanding what your energy was in the moment, right? You're saying you didn't even know. Maybe I was between projects. Maybe I didn't have time for this. But reading that right from the very beginning, like you can feel when somebody is in a rush or if somebody isn't connecting. right? And the bold part is saying, I feel like your energy is somewhere else. Should we reschedule this meeting? Or do you just want to take a breath? Or should we get a drink maybe and just relax a minute? What would be good for you to be able to really be present here? Right? That's the bold thing to say. But there's risk in that, because what you might say is, I'm really not interested in hearing what you have to say. I really didn't even want to take this meeting. But we think that's a negative, but it's not. Right? If you really don't want to be here, great, I'll move on to somebody who does. But there's a risk in that. And so knowing how you show up is one thing, but reading how the other person shows up is just as important, because it's a creation of energy, right? It's a creation of being in the same space. And so a couple of weeks ago, I did this class on buying signs, which was all about reading body language, right? Which is so important, because we get so busy and talking about all the things we know, we don't see how the other person's responding. And that is so super critical for so many reasons, because when you're curious and you see somebody lean back and you know you're losing them, when's the time to address that? Right now. You don't let that fester. That's a little start of a no. I can see that didn't resonate with you. What are you feeling about what I just said? Or is that something that you're not interested in, or whatever the case may be? But you allow them to talk about that next objection right then and there, so we can clear the air, right? But that's important, right? Or if somebody's leaning in and they're very interested and they're ready to buy, this is critical. You be quiet, right? You let them buy. You can tell them all the other stuff later, right? But we keep talking as salespeople because I've got my notes and I've got my agenda, and here's all the things that I have to tell you. And more times than not, we talk ourselves out of a sale that we didn't even realize we had in the moment. So that's what I mean about creating energy, is just being in the same space and understanding where somebody else is coming from in the moment and being there with them, right? As salespeople, we take up too much space and we don't leave enough space for the other person. It's about dialing that back and letting them come in and letting them say, gosh, that's a really great product. I really would like to buy it, versus, do you want to buy? Does that make sense?
It is. And I think one of the things that I'm really grateful to have discovered positive intelligence and mental fitness. I was talking about it earlier, that in times maybe of, as an introvert or a trained ambivert, we don't always, like with that conversation with the financial services person years ago, this was over a decade ago. I didn't say it earlier. I wasn't comfortable earlier. It was a person at the time who kind of could sense was kind of coming from a position of power in an organization that I was newly a member of. So I really was there from the discovery perspective, plus for, the invitation really that they had extended, which basically was they were interested at the time in promotional products. But I think when it changes, when we feel the change emotionally, whether it's a thing that some of us do as women in business or just as humans in business, where we're not always comfortable and we're not always expressing, as you would say, our truth, it can open the doorways to one of the most amazing transformational relationships, to like really cool collaborations, to amazing partnerships, to future speaking gigs, to conferences, to all of the big, wonderful, juicy stuff that kind of lights us up. But I think, like you're saying, that the be bold part comes from some sort of internal comfort of kind of knowing we're fully present.
Yes.
That we're really showing up.
Yes. Well, and I think the be bold part is to create discomfort, because nothing happens in comfort, right? That's status quo. I'm not moving because it feels good to be here. But if you can create discomfort, if you can show someone where I can help you with your discomfort, but you have to pull them into that space, right? They have to feel uncomfortable to know that my services are going to help them, right? If it's somebody selling insurance, right? Nobody wants to buy insurance. Nobody on the planet wakes up and says, I can't wait to buy insurance today. So they're already 3 miles behind the starting line, right? But what do I want? I want to protect my family. I want to protect my home. I want to protect what I've earned. So you have to speak in that space. Now, that's all great. That applies to everybody. But what's my personal situation in that? Right? What is my personal situation? I once had a guy, and I was pretty young, so I really don't have an excuse. And he was like a handyman guy, and he said, "Teresa, what if a crack showed up on your wall? What would you do?" And I said, "I'd find a picture and I'd hang it over it." That was my reality at the time. Like, I'm not calling a handyman. I'm just going to hang a picture of it. So you have to be in that person's reality, not just generally, let me help you help your family, right? What is my pain point, right? If I lose my home, then that's my pain point. Or, you know what? If I lose my home, I can always find another place to live. What I need to know is my family's taken care of, right? What is my pain point? But we fail to do that because we have, and for most salespeople, they've done it a long time and they just show up the same way they always show up. So that's the first step is how are you showing up? Because, Melanie, when you walk into a room, you change the energy of the room based on your energy, right? If you just made a big sale or you just had a great podcast, you're like, yes, I nailed that one. And everybody in the room, what do? Yay, their energy goes up with you, right? But if you walk in the room and you're sad, your boyfriend just dumped you and you're just super sad, then everybody in the room becomes sad with you, right? To comfort you. That's power. And that's the awareness of that power is how we should walk into every conversation we have. Right? How do I want to walk into this conversation? Who do I choose to be in this conversation? Right? And then you allow the other person the same space. And that's how that boldness and curiosity is created.
I love that because you're reminding me of a comment of a post that I was reading earlier from Brian Morgan of think deeply, write clearly. And I love Brian's post for a couple of reasons. They, like Clarine Mitchell of TCM Communications, their posts kind of really bring me to clarity.
Mm.
And it's not, I think we need stuff that hits us not when we're fuzzy, but not when everything's crystal clear. And maybe that's another reason why I was in love with mental fitness. It allows me a chance by using a positive intelligence rep, to tap into a sage power to hit a pause button. Because I
Yeah.
think we get overloaded, whether it's by the marketing messages, whether it's by planning what we'd like to say. I'm a bullet point girl. I'll admit it. They're everywhere. And years ago, a dear friend, and Eve Voyeveda, who of Brand Your Dream, Eve's suggestion was, Mel, get a couple of Post-its and put them on your computer. Put 3 Post-its with the bullet point. Kind of help you where you want to stay and where you want to stay focused. But I think in addition to the be bold part, I think there's a focus part that's needed so that others know our energy, our styles, that it's safe to explore, that we are really curious about ways to help them solve problems or ways we can help them. And in the process of being bold, I love that you said to really analyze when it's not the best time for someone. I used to make calls and have days where I planned on my warm calls. And one of the things I started asking regularly was, is this the right time for us to have this conversation? It let the person know. People say, you should never do that. You're letting somebody off the hook. If it's not good for you, it is so not good for us. And just to acknowledge that in the curiosity, plus sometimes we were talking to people who just had something life-changing happen and they needed some help. They needed a friend. They needed somebody to talk to in business or, as a coworker or as a colleague.
Right.
Curiosity also, Jeffrey Davis of Tracking Wonder has helped me lean into now for, wow, it's got to be almost 7 or 8 years that I'm delighted to follow him. and he talks about just the showing up curious, almost as if it's our young genius, as if we're bringing that young child with us and using that lens to kind of explore. But how would you say, Teresa, in sales, what's a way that we could kind of use our creativity to help us create more energy or manage our emotions in business or in sales calls? Where would you say we should start?
First is awareness, right? You have to know your triggers. In sales, I used to say there's no crying in sales. There's a lot of crying in sales because it's such an emotional roller coaster. I'm about to win the sale. I lost this sale. They're being mean. I mean, there's just so much going on. So you have to know your triggers, right? And my trigger, I have an ego trigger in sales. I know what I'm talking about. And if you challenge me, like I don't know what I'm talking about, that's when I get triggered. So I have to be aware of that and realize that this is either a negotiation ploy or that's just who they are. And I have to learn to respond instead of react, right? And so if somebody challenges me, I ask them more questions, right? Oh, it sounds like you know a lot about this. Tell me what you know, because I want to meet them where they're at too. Because once you start that challenge, once you puff up your chest and they puff up, you're done. Right? Nobody wins in that situation. Or I was just reading a book on emotional intelligence, selling and emotional intelligence. And this guy walks in and he was trying to get a check, right? The account hadn't paid the bill and he was trying to get a check and he'd been in there several times. And he just flipped his lid. Like, how hard is it to get a check from you people? 3 months later, the account canceled because he flipped his lid. You have to be aware of those triggers and those automatic responses. And the best thing you can do is take a deep breath and let your brain catch up with that little lizard brain of yours to say, okay, this is not the best response, right? That lizard brain is flight, fight, or freeze. And so none of those are good when you're a human. And you can actually say, okay, you know what? I need the check by Friday, or we're going to have to pause your account. I apologize for the inconvenience, but here's how we need to do that, right? You need your brain time to catch up. So for those emotions, know what your triggers are. And you can do this just by keeping a notebook every day and walking around. And when you get triggered, write it down. Like I get triggered by my son. Family will trigger you. If you want to know what triggers you, just write down with your family because they know how to push the button. Write them down and then practice not getting triggered, right? You'll freak them out because they know mom gets triggered when we do this. So let's do it and trigger mom. And when I don't get triggered, they're like, who are you? Where's mom? So practice just not getting triggered and responding in the way that you want to.
And you mentioned awareness. So I know you mentioned emotional intelligence and I mentioned positive intelligence. Is there any other way you think that we can increase our awareness and have it in our toolkits?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's a practice, right? You have to decide to practice it for sure. But another tool that I just love is intuition. I don't think we use our intuition enough. And so if we can learn to trust that voice in our gut that says go right instead of go left, then we open up a whole new world of possibilities. So yeah, if you've got self-awareness and you're aware of others combined with intuition, then that lays a path for you. But I think the key, like the golden key at the end, is confidence. Right? You have to be able to pull this off with confidence because you have to believe that it's okay to show up bold and it's okay to be curious, or they won't believe it. So that's one place where you definitely could practice showing up better, is being more confident. And, it's not easy. When I started selling, I was in my early 20s, an introvert, had never sold anything, had never worked with a business, had never done any of that. And I'm calling on these businesses that have been in business for years and telling them that I can help them. And they're like, you're 12, you can't help us. And I had no confidence. But I made a sale and that gave me confidence. And I turned a no into a yes and that gave me confidence. And so over the years, I built that confidence up to where it drives my kids crazy, but I can talk to anyone about anything because either I know about it or I'm curious about it. That's the only thing, right? One of those two things. So, yeah, intuition and confidence, definitely need those in your toolbox.
I love that. And you remind me, it's one of the things that really took me a long time before I named my live. And it took the pandemic and relocating the Impossible magnet that was on our old refrigerator to kind of shift that gear, to kind of add the confidence piece in. Because just like you're saying, I had been in, when I was in promotional products, and it's okay. This fall it'll be 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things about it was, somebody said to me, "You don't look like you have 15 years of experience." And I think, people sometimes they need to hear our credentials or our expertise. And now people everybody's like, "Oh, position yourself as an expert. Be the go-to person. Become known for something, so that, that one word or that one thought pops in." And I never ever thought about putting a sign out about confidence. It was a piece that I was missing for such a long time, as as a human, as a professional, and in the beginning as a coach. It's one of the reasons why I don't want to hang out the shingle.
Mm.
Um, and I think, just like you're saying, that occasionally we have people who challenge us about that, which may take us back to the be bold, the be curious part. But on the other hand, they're really reminding us, if we don't show up with not just the curiosity, but as you said, with the awareness, with the intention, with the confidence, with something that others can discover about us. Because
Mm.
that was the part that I felt really was missing years ago. As the introvert woman in business, I wasn't sure what I wanted people to learn about me, other than the fact that I promised to take really good care of them while they were solving their problems.
Mm.
I promised to really show up and help them when designing or handcrafting solutions or strategies for their teams. I think it's interesting too, because we're always looking, and I've stopped doing this, for how others see us.
Mm.
In the old days, we had the FaceTime. You had to just pop up. I'm talking to wonderful clients recently who are returning back to the office. Some of them on staggered days and staggered stages, and certain departments on some days, and certain skill sets on others. But it really reminded me, when I heard about it, about the FaceTime, the just showing up part.
Yes. That alone can be bold, right? That alone, just getting on a Zoom call or turning on your camera in a Zoom meeting, can be a bold step, right? So it might have to be baby steps. It might not be, show up and throw your arms open and say, "Here I am." Some people can't pull that off, but you can. You can. The first step, I think, is, if somebody misunderstands you, to correct them, right? What I hear you saying, Melanie, ABC, and you're like, "Well, that's not exactly right." Right? That's a bold step to say, "No, I really want to be understood here. And I feel like you're opening the space for me to do that." So sometimes it is baby steps, but we were born bold, right? We learned to hold it, and we learned to shut up and sit down. Children will be seen and not heard. We learned all of that. Now we need to learn to stand up and speak, right? And show up and talk and just be there, because each of us has a role to play. And if you don't play your role, then the game doesn't work, right? Yeah, all the players have to play.
So many are afraid of expressing their inner voices,
Mm.
or showing up in a way where your outside voice, on a gray day, on a day when your hands are full, or somebody's presenting to you a challenge. You're And we'll talk about it in an upcoming live. I've been calling it language filters.
Mm.
We really can. And I'm pausing for a second, because I actually heard that in our friend of an extended family, in his funeral service earlier. His
Mm.
son said, "If you knew my dad was direct. There was nothing he would hold back on." He says, I have a filter. I found it kind of interesting because his dad was known for that. If you didn't want to hear it, you shouldn't come hang out with Gene that day. You weren't supposed to show up. But I think the hard part is online, there's a caution underneath this, whether it's that our opinions won't be respected, where they won't be appreciated, where they're not welcome, where they're not heard. I was in a couple of LinkedIn threads during Black Lives Matter, and someone put up a comment in a thread, and it was somebody who I would have referred without a moment's thought. I knew they were a great professional, they provided wonderful services, and in the thread, they weren't looking for bold opinions. They were looking for homogenized ones.
Mm.
And it took me a little bit because I thought, hey, this is like somebody I saw as a leader with a real vibrant voice and a wonderful brand. And I was really surprised when I typed my comment that kind of the comment wasn't welcome. And not surprise, but I was like, okay, they're going in a different direction.
Mhm.
And either they're inviting comments to build like the longest engaged LinkedIn thread, but I realized sometimes underneath this, all aren't welcome. And that part under the be bold, that managing that fear that somebody doesn't understand you,
Mhm.
that they're not willing to understand you, that they're not showing up willing to discover what lights you up, or new ways to kind of show up as a professional and as a caring one.
Yes. Well, and I would say embrace that. There are going to be people who don't agree with you, don't like what you have to say, don't like the direction you're going. Embrace that. That's the beauty of our culture. We all get to say what we want, right? But what you don't have to embrace is their participation in your life, right? Let them go.
Mm.
Let them go, because really, when it gets down to it, that's all marketing is: attracting the people that you want to work with and repelling those that you don't. So the more that you stand up for what you believe in and the more you repel people, the better for your business.
Thanks, Catherine, for sharing the gems of what Teresa's sharing with us. It really is reminding me somewhere under there, under the wisdom, under the reminder to kind of show up, whether it's people like to say show up authentically, others are saying show up without fear. I think as long as we can show up in that bold and curious
Mm-hmm.
lane from a respectful lane
Mm-hmm.
and from a kind lane, you know, it doesn't mean that being bold always is the opportunity under the insect repellent to kind of destroy somebody's day. It's
Right.
the reminder underneath, be caring and kind and sensitive. I really love that you're saying that.
Yes. Well, and accept, because it's about accepting somebody else's boldness. If I give my
Mm.
permission for me to show up bold, then I give you permission too. And I would say being bold is just stepping even just a toe out of your comfort zone. That's the key. If it feels a little bit uncomfortable, that's the best place to be. Go for it. But I think that is the hardest part, is just that there's that line of, I'm not comfortable, so I'm not going to do it. Whereas entrepreneurs and salespeople that are successful, they say, I'm not comfortable, but I'm going to have to do this. And they do it.
I'm smiling because earlier I was able to, and Catherine, thank you again for being there. I I volunteered. This was going to be my Instagram live day. And it's kind of interesting for people who know me. For me to go live multiple times in a day is not the way Mel starts off a week. But I had come back from vacation. I was talking with Catherine, and I was like, I'm ready to stretch. And when we were talking about it earlier, I was talking with Della Martin, an amazing teacher who I'm going to tag in this thread. She's an English teacher for those who are trying to learn English, and
Hmm.
and she does it in a way by encouraging you to read and helping you master English through increasing your love of reading. But we were talking about comfort zones and stretch zones. And if they're not comfort zones or stretch zones, that it's kind of could be a panic or a stress zone. And I think it is the reminder as we're hopefully trying to expand, but we acknowledged as a starting point, and I really appreciated Della's comment that comfort zones are where many prefer to live.
Mm-hmm.
It's the safe place. It's the they know me here.
Mm-hmm.
It's the my voice is welcome.
Mm-hmm.
It's my style is welcome. Because I was laughing. For me, Monday's not usually the day when I start something new. So it's funny. And thank you again, Catherine. Catherine sent me, she's like, Mel needs a visual. So Catherine sent me these great visual links on going Instagram live. I had every link and I could click through and get another link and another link. And then, as we would say, emotions took over. I went to this, to this funeral on Zoom, and I'm like, every single note just like popped out. So it is a reminder as you are trying to be bold. And I think the thing that Della and I mentioned that I really want to share is besides tapping into mental fitness or emotional intelligence and popping into your awareness or your intuition is a reminder to breathe. But Teresa said it really, really well. Somebody leaning in, they're ready to discover your boldness. They're ready to discover your zone of genius. We don't always see it on a Zoom call or a virtual call unless somebody really leans in. We see, as Teresa's saying, the body language stuff. I remember someone saying before as a coach, if somebody touches behind their ear, they're never going to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember somebody saying that before. Why is it the ear? And I don't know if it's an NLP thing or somebody who's watching, who's in neurolinguistic programming. You'll have to tell us why this is a signal like a never, you know? But I
Well,
think the reminder is pause.
well, sometimes, and I'm not an NLP expert, but different body parts signal different things, and that to me signals I'm not listening. I'm done listening. Right? Closing my ear. If they fold their hands in front of them, they've just closed their heart. They're not open anymore. Right? And when you're in a conversation, and when that happens, if it's an important conversation, that's the time to say, I see that you're not, I see that I've lost you. I see that I see you're closing off a little bit. What's that about? Right? Because if you really want to get to it and you want to be the bold and curious, you have to ask those hard questions. Because if you really want a relationship with this person, that's the way it has to be. You have to step a little out of your comfort zone. And that's how we get stuck in ruts are the comfort zones, right? We do the same thing with the same people, and then we either get bored or complain, or we start to see their faults, right? You fall in love with somebody and then there's all these faults and you're like, I don't care, I just love him. Pretty soon he's not putting the toilet seat down. He can't find the hamper with, if I gave him a flashlight, all those things come up because you're stuck in a rut and you've decided on this comfort zone. And what does every therapist in the world say? Let's try something new. Let's step out of your comfort zone. Let's move things around a little bit. And you can do that with anybody, anytime. You can do that with yourself. If you get stuck in a rut, you could say, what would take me out of my comfort zone a little bit? And if you can't do it on your own, call a friend and say, I need you to hold me accountable. I decided that I'm going to do this. I need you to check on me at the end of the week and make sure I did it. Start to move. We move. We're like sharks. If we're not moving, we're dying. We're just decaying in one spot. You got to keep moving.
Appreciate the PDF on LinkedIn there's an Institute for like Global Attractions, the IAAPA is the acronym. And in one of the education sessions, they were talking about how the pace of change was accelerating. And we're not always doing that. And I like that Catherine's reminding us cold showers are always a quick way to get out of that zone. Catherine, I love that because it's a reminder to show up with our humor, and in a way, that kind of lets us know, hey, there's something new happening in there. I think the interesting part too is I love it when we were talking about positive intelligence. It reminds me that it try to help us get to the point where we tap into our sage powers. So we're doing this using PQ reps, which are kind of like our pause button. So friends are starting, and family members. Actually, my family, we were talking about family. I do my PQ reps. No one is seeing them under the table at the family table during complex conversations like the ones we were having this weekend. But they're reminding me the locating the powers to explore, to empathize, to activate, to innovate, to navigate, and to try and bring that into every day. I was saying today's an interesting day, and I loved it from locating Brian's post before. Today's writing day. I'm about to just write today. Tonight is one of those 10 to 20,000 words night. I know it. It's time to just curl up and make some time, or whatever else was on the calendar. If you reach out to me today and you haven't seen an answer to an email, I'm in writing zone.
Nice.
You know?
Nice. Yes. Well, and when you're talking about that positive intelligence, somebody reminded me last week, and I think this is so beautiful. We're all really doing the best that we can, right? If you can hold that space of, yeah, I might disagree with you, but I really feel like you're doing the best that you can, then what's the problem? I might not agree with you, but I think that you think you are in exactly the place you need to be. Who am I to say you're not?
I think that goes back to navigate, to knowing when there are days, and we were talked about this before, when there were days, today's one of those days to stick to my faith walk. I had a plan for the day. My energy, my faith, my instincts are taking me someplace else. And today I'm giving myself permission to go there. And I think that's the part too underneath this when we talk about being bold and curious. Some are very responsive to peer pressure. Others are very responsive to FOMO, to that fear of missing out. I believe we're exactly where we're supposed to be.
Yes.
And all of the goodness we need, all of the great steps, all of the energy we need, it's in the room, whether we see it or we feel it or not, or we're tuned into it.
Exactly.
Whether it's in our hearts, whether it's in our thoughts. I have not been so grateful to have picked a topic like the topic we picked today in a while. I was really reminded of Teresa, and I had this deep intuitive intuition, follow your magic kind of conversation. And it was cool too, because we were talking about alchemy and how we line stuff up. And now I know when I get stuck, I'm going to call Teresa and say, hey, Teresa, I'm stuck here. What do you think?
Yeah.
I think also you're reminding us, be more sensitive when others are retreating or when they're leaning in because they're curious.
Mm-hmm.
They're ready or they're almost ready.
Mm-hmm.
But I love, as you would say, when you're saying in the Be Bold, you're reminding us, just listen. Brian Morgan's post is about that today, about the framework, whether it's a framework that we use for communication, whether it's a framework we use for speaking, for comprehension, but the real reminder is somebody else's frame, somebody else's puzzle pieces. And as you would say, be bold and curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved your question, and Teresa and I were working on a topic, but we didn't lean in, hey, what are we going to talk about? That wasn't where we started.
No, it was born out of our conversation.
And I have to thank you for that, the reminder, as we're encouraging our listeners and others in business to create a space to grow, create a space to express, and to help others create those spaces. It may be exactly what somebody else needs that day, and you're just not sure.
Well, create a space to make mistakes. It's okay. It's okay. If you make a mistake, if you fail, it's just information about don't step there next time, step over here. So I think, to say, I'm going to say this, it might be a mistake, but I feel compelled. My intuition is saying somebody needs to hear this. Yeah.
I'm starting to do that in my LinkedIn direct messages. If you sent me a connection request immediately and you sent a pitch request or a request for a call, and it's not that I wasn't feeling it, but I'm trying to show up in that same space too. And it can be challenging when it's in written communications, especially with somebody we don't know well yet.
Yes. Yes, I've always struggled with written. I'm a verbal person, and I'm also a very direct person. So if you send me, if you our DMs, I'm like, I didn't get it. Like, I'm not mad. Like, it's not like I didn't get it. I didn't get it. And I've had to be very careful with people I don't know, because that communication comes off a little bit different. And so, yeah, there again, you have to read the subtext in what you write and what they write, and I try to write back the way they write, right? Because that's their comfort zone. I can play in your comfort zone for a while until we can come together.
Well, I have to thank you for that. And really, it comes across as really, as some would say, specific is terrific.
Mm,
There's no attitude, there's no ill will, there's no drama, there's no bad vibes. It really is good vibes only. Hey, I'm here. Are you here? If not, hey, you know, I remember asking Teresa a question. Teresa's like, "Oh, you got it already. It's in your messages." And I think it's the reminder, under be bold and be curious. Just be,
right.
just be,
Right.
just be.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for a juicy, delicious conversation.
All right. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. And everybody, thanks for tuning in live and for replays and your patience with some interesting tech issues today. We're having a LinkedIn awareness thing on my end. I can see that's up. So, really want to thank you for joining us today and hope you all have a magnificent, magnificent day. Take great care. Stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, and please stay in touch.